Remember like 4 months ago when there were rumors that Darius Garland was going to force a trade if the Cavs kept Donovan Mitchell? Or when we all thought that the Warriors were doomed because they couldn't get a deal done for Paul George or Lauri Markkanen? Well, everything's perfectly fine now. The Cavs and Warriors have been the story of the early NBA season, and despite what appeared to be pretty shaky off seasons at the time, they've actually completely saved their teams with the moves that they made. Let's begin in Cleveland, because the interesting thing about the Cavs is that this didn't have to do with some kind of big free agency spending spree, didn't have to do with them making massive trades, shaking up the roster in a significant way despite outside pressure to do so. It had everything to do with a couple of things. One, bringing back their own guys, Jarrett Allen and more importantly Donovan Mitchell, both signing extensions. I talked all last season about how the 2024 offseason was the pivot point for this era of Cavs basketball. I loved the Mitchell trade at the time, thought it was a fantastic idea by them, but until he signed an extension, that was going to be hanging over them. The possibility of Donovan Mitchell playing somewhere else was always going to be a factor for them. And when he signed the extension this offseason, that changed everything. Despite some of the rumors about the Darius Garland stuff that obviously they have figured out, him coming back has provided continuity, it's provided chemistry, he's locked in, and despite the fact that I felt like there was a real possibility that he was going to leave in 2025, and if that was the case, the Cavs were going to have to look at trading him this past offseason or during the year. If Donovan Mitchell didn't sign that extension, he would be on the trade block right now. He potentially could be on a different team, so the Cavs wouldn't risk losing him in 2025 free agency for nothing, but he comes back, and at that moment, everything started to shift for Cleveland. The other significant thing that happened was that they didn't break up the roster just in general. There was a lot of outside pressure for them to break up the backcourt combination of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and or the frontcourt combination of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. I was pretty confident that even if Mitchell decided to re-sign, that Jarrett Allen would be elsewhere, that they would look to trade him and try and put Evan Mobley at the 5 more. And at the time that the Darius Garland rumors were coming out, I didn't know what to make about that situation either. And it felt like we were heading in a direction where the Cavs were going to be making significant changes to those core 4 guys, and they didn't. They kept them all, and then the biggest thing they did was they made a change at head coach. JB Bickerstaff gone, he's doing fine in Detroit, but Kenny Atkinson was brought in, and that is the move that completely changed the direction of the Cavs. But before we get to that, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is an independent privacy company that aims to make getting privacy simple and accessible for everyone. Their Privacy Pro service is a 3-in-1 subscription service, including a VPN that helps protect your personal info from being exploited by hackers, scammers, and privacy invasive companies. Obviously, that's a huge deal to me. Everything that I do from a job perspective is online, and I'm sure it's a huge deal to you guys as well, with everybody having such a strong online presence, which is why I trust DuckDuckGo. As part of that 3-in-1 subscription service, you have the DuckDuckGo VPN, which is easy to set up in just one click. It secures your Wi-Fi connection anytime, anywhere across your entire device on up to 5 devices at once. It provides that extra layer of protection when traveling, gaming, shopping, and browsing. And the second part of it is, of course, you don't want your personal information out there online. And Privacy Pro helps find and remove that info from over 50 data broker websites and rescans regularly, taking steps to keep it removed. Lastly, Privacy Pro includes identity theft restoration, a service to help you restore your identity if it gets stolen. The service offers 24/7 assistance with most calls answered in less than 30 seconds and can help fix credit report mistakes and help cover certain financial losses. Privacy Pro is currently available to US residents only, so if that's you, try it now for free. You can try Privacy Pro for free for 7 days and then pay $9.99 a month, or sign up for an annual subscription and pay $99.99 and save 16%, or the equivalent of 2 months free over the course of a year. So go check that out, and thank you again to DuckDuckGo for sponsoring this video. Now back to the Cavs. Adding Kenny Atkinson has been arguably the best move that any team made in the entirety of the offseason, and this is what he did during his time in Brooklyn. Before Kevin Durant got there, before Kyrie Irving got there, Kenny Atkinson built up a roster over a span of a few seasons that the year before KD and Kyrie got there, won 42 games. They weren't that talented of a roster, but the chemistry and the continuity was there. And now that he has a significant talent upgrade in Cleveland compared to what he had in Brooklyn, everything is clicking. They look like the exact same kind of team with great chemistry, great vibes, great morale, but just better talent. He's unlocked everything for this team offensively, and having that core 4 of guys, Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen, all playing well together, and the incredible shooting and spacing of guys like Ty Jerome that they've added into this rotation has made them this unstoppable force to begin the season. Beginning a season 15-0 is not something that's supposed to happen, especially a team that we all kind of thought would be like a 45-50 win team before the season. And it's interesting that they're paired together in the early part of the year with Golden State, because there are some similarities from this Cavs team to kind of the rise of the Warriors back in that 2014, 2015, 2016 range, where they went from decent team, had some talent, disappointed in the playoffs, fired their coach, new coach comes in, and all of a sudden they're playing really well. It's TBD on whether that's going to happen in the postseason with Cleveland, but right now there are definitely some comparisons. Which brings me to the Golden State Warriors. And in direct contrast to what the Cavs did this offseason, a lot of what has changed for the Warriors in a positive direction is actual roster moves. They lost Chris Paul, they lost Klay Thompson, they lost Dario Saric, and they brought in DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield, among others. And that somehow has changed everything for this roster. We honestly thought, or at least I thought, that this was the end of the Steph era in Golden State for the most part. In terms of competing for titles, this was it. They were not able to add Paul George. They were not able to add Lauri Markkanen, and it was clear that they felt like that was their best path forward to try and contend, was to trade either Brandon Podziemski or Jonathan Kuminga or that plus some other picks to bring in a star. They still wanted that three-star model with Draymond, Steph, and whether it be Paul George or Lauri Markkanen. And when they weren't able to do that, they were just kind of this team that was stuck in the middle. Well, that stuck in the middle team has now begun the season 10-2, and combined with Cleveland, they're 27-2 to begin the season. And there's a couple of things happening here for Golden State that made this offseason so impressive. First, it had to have been a tough decision to move on from Klay Thompson. Obviously, by the time he actually left, it was clear that that was what was going to happen. But leading up to that decision, when they were trying to bring him back, they were bringing him some contract offers. When they weren't able to go all the way up to the price that he wanted, that had to have been a tough decision for them, but it is one that has worked out perfectly for them. They're younger, they're quicker, they're more athletic, and they've replaced a lot of the shooting stuff they like to do with someone like Buddy Hield and others. Obviously, the Chris Paul thing saved them a ton of money. That made sense once he wasn't involved in any kind of a trade. And then bringing in these versatile depth pieces around Steph, around Draymond, has made them this super high-flying, energetic team that they were at the beginning of the Steph, Klay, and Draymond era. And they look a lot more like those teams than they ever have over the past couple of seasons. And the combination of these two teams shows us a real shift in the team-building dynamic around the NBA. Despite the fact that Golden State tried to get Paul George and they tried to get Lauri Markkanen, what their team is now and what Cleveland is a perfect example of the way things have changed. Teams don't want to just do the 2 or 3 stars and then a bunch of random minimum level guys anymore. They want depth. They want a bunch of different pieces. They want 8-9 man rotations, guys that can shoot, guys that can defend on a night-to-night basis. And that's what each of these teams have managed to create, albeit in drastically different ways. And the real question now moving forward is, are they real contenders? Are they actually going to be able to do something in the postseason? For me, I'm more skeptical about that being the case for Golden State, just because I don't think the roster is as good, despite how great a lot of these role player guys have been. There's still a ton of reliance on Steph and on Draymond on each side of the floor, and I'm more skeptical in a tough Western Conference that they're actually going to be something resembling a contender. But Cleveland, on the other hand, I think this is very, very real. I certainly think you can make some of those comparisons to Golden State when they kind of rose to power and they first finally had this fantastic group and all of these guys were running around. They had such great chemistry. I think there's a lot of comparisons there. From a talent perspective, we always knew that Cleveland was one of the more talented teams in the Eastern Conference once they made the Donovan Mitchell trade. It's one of the reasons why I thought that the Mitchell trade was such a good idea for them in the first place. Once they were, of course, able to bring back Donovan Mitchell on an extension, it makes it look that much better. It's because it was a very good basketball fit for him. And now that they have guys that can space, guys that can guard around those 4 players, I think they're one of the most talented teams in the conference, and they absolutely have a chance to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. The problem is they have probably the best team in the league also in their conference in the Boston Celtics, but they are absolutely real, true contenders. And the concept that that would be the case for either of these teams, much less both, 4 to 5 months ago was completely unforeseen.